The wind howled like a banshee across the desolate plains, kicking up clouds of dust that stung the eyes and clung to the throat. Into this unforgiving wasteland rode a lone figure, astride a midnight black stallion that gleamed with sweat under the merciless sun. His name was Caleb Ryder, a gunslinger at 33, with a face carved from the harsh frontier itself, rugged, sun-browned, and marked by a thin scar slashing across his right brow. His deep blue eyes burned with a quiet intensity, shadowed beneath the brim of a weathered Stetson hat. A crimson bandana fluttered at his neck, a splash of color against his faded black shirt and leather vest, while twin revolvers hung low on his hips, their grips worn smooth from years of use. His boots, caked with the red earth of a dozen territories, bore silver spurs that sang a faint tune with each step of his horse. He was headed for Crimson Gulch, a ramshackle town perched on the edge of nowhere, its wooden buildings leaning like drunkards against the wind. The townsfolk watched from behind cracked windows, sensing the storm this stranger carried with him. Something big was about to break loose, and it started with the clatter of hooves on the dry, splintered street. The Scarlet Rose Saloon stood as the beating heart of Crimson Gulch, its faded sign creaking in the wind. Inside, the air was heavy, with the tang of sweat, cheap whiskey, and the faint perfume of defiance. Behind the bar stood Sadie McCall, 29, a woman who could silence a room with a glance. Her chestnut hair fell in loose waves to her shoulders, framing a face both beautiful and fierce, with hazel eyes that sparkled like the desert after rain. She wore a burgundy dress that hugged her curves, its hem frayed from years of hard work, and a silver locket dangled at her chest, a secret she kept close. Sadie had inherited the saloon from her late father and turned it into a fortress of her own making, ruling over cowboys and outlaws alike with a sharp tongue and a sharper mind. As Caleb pushed through the swinging doors, the chatter died, and Sadie's gaze locked onto him. He was trouble-wrapped in leather, and she'd seen his kind before, but something about the way he carried himself, steady and unafraid, stirred a flicker of curiosity she couldn't shake. Caleb sauntered to the bar, his spurs jingling softly, and tipped his hat to Sadie. "Whiskey, straight," he said, his voice a low drawl that carried the weight of the open range. Sadie slid a glass across the bar, her fingers brushing his as she did, and a jolt shot through her unexpected electorate. She masked it with a smirk. "You got a name, stranger, or do I just call you Trouble?" she asked, leaning forward. "Caleb Ryder," he replied, his blue eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. "And you're the one who looks like she could start a war or end one." Sadie laughed, a sound that cut through the saloon's haze, and poured herself a shot. "Sadie McCall, welcome to my kingdom." Their banter sparked like flint on steel, drawing curious glances from the patrons. There was a pull between them, raw and undeniable, as if the desert itself had conspired to throw them together. Days turned to nights, and Caleb became a fixture at the Scarlet Rose, drawn back by Sadie's fire. They traded stories over late night, drinks his of dodging bullets and chasing ghosts, hers of fighting off greedy ranchers and keeping the saloon alive. One moonlit night, Sadie challenged him to a ride out to Devil's Canyon, a jagged scar in the earth where the wind sang through the rocks. They galloped under a sky ablaze with stars, her laughter echoing off the canyon walls. At its edge, they dismounted, and Caleb caught her hand, pulling her close. "You're a hell of a woman, Sadie McCall," he murmured, his breath warm against her cheek. She met his gaze, her heart pounding. "And you're a fool if you think I'll fall for a drifter," she teased, but her voice softened as their lips hovered inches apart. The canyon stretched endless below, a silent witness to the spark igniting between them. Their stolen moments shattered as hoofbeats thundered in the distance. A posse of outlaws, led by the ruthless Jack Viper Kane, stormed into Crimson Gulch, their rifles gleaming in the moonlight. Kane, a wiry man of 40, with a snake tattoo curling up his neck, demanded tribute from the town or he'd burn it to ash. Sadie and Caleb raced back, finding the saloon surrounded, its patrons trembling. "This is my home," Sadie whispered, her voice steel. Caleb nodded, his hand on his revolver. "Then we fight for it." They slipped inside, rallying the townsfolk, men with shotguns, women with frying pans. Kane's men laughed, underestimating the defiance brewing within. As the outlaws kicked open the doors, Caleb's guns blazed, and Sadie's shout rallied the charge. The saloon erupted into a maelstrom of gunfire and chaos. Caleb moved like a phantom, his shots felling outlaws with deadly precision, while Sadie darted behind the bar, blasting with a shotgun she'd kept hidden. Kane's men returned fire, bullets splintering wood and shattering bottles. A burly outlaw lunged at Sadie, but she smashed a chair over his head, sending him crashing down. Caleb faced Kane, their eyes locking in a duel of wills. "You picked the wrong town," Caleb growled, dodging a bullet and firing back. Kane sneered, lunging with a knife, but Caleb sidestepped, slamming him against the wall. The townsfolk fought bravely, their spirit ignited by the pair at the center of it all. The tide turned as Kane's men faltered, their numbers dwindling. Caleb pinned Kane to the floor, his revolver pressed to the outlaw's temple. "Call M off," he snarled. Kane, bloodied and beaten, spat a curse but waved his hand, signaling surrender. The surviving outlaws dropped their weapons, hands raised, as the townsfolk cheered. Sadie lowered her shotgun, her chest heaving, and met Caleb's gaze across the room. They'd saved Crimson Gulch together, their bond forged in fire. As the dust settled, he crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "You're one hell of a partner," he said, his voice rough with emotion. She smiled, fierce and tender. "So are you, Red." Morning broke over Crimson Gulch, the sky a blaze of gold and crimson. Caleb and Sadie stood on the saloon's porch, watching the town stir back to life. Folks sweeping debris, sharing weary smiles. His arm rested around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "You staying, Ryder?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. He looked down at her, his blue eyes clear. "Reckon I've drifted long enough. Found something worth rooting for." She grinned, pulling him into a kiss that tasted of dust and promise. The town had survived, and so had they, their love a flame kindled in the wild heart of the West.